Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the last trading day of this week. Futures were open momentarily for a couple hours in the morning today, and yeah, S&P futures closed at 1 p.m. Markets are not open today if you have not seen. S&P down 0.93%, NASDAQ down about 1.1%, and Dow implying an open of down almost 1% as well. Oil futures were up almost 3%. This has to do with the Middle East situation. I have some updates to bring you in that regard in this video. Potentially, we're getting closer to dialogue, diplomacy. But there's one headline in particular about the Strait of Hormuz, which I think is causing a lot of this fear, because that is what this conflict is really about for the markets. It's about energy, because Wall Street doesn't care who's killing who. Wall Street only cares about financial implications, and the financial implication for this conflict would be an oil shock. And the higher oil goes, the more of an implied oil shock is possible or could be coming. So a little bit of good and bad news in today's video. Hope you guys are ready for it. Now, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. If you guys want to come trade with us as well, come join the trading community. Check out that link down below in the description of this video. We are finding value where Wall Street is overlooking, okay? It's not Wall Street's fault. These are smaller companies. They are less covered. They don't have retail investor bases. Okay, they're not your typical stocks you've heard of. They are stocks that are doing big things, that have a lot of value, that are underappreciated and underowned. We are going out, doing the work, doing the due diligence, finding these low-key, under-the-radar AI stocks, gene editing names that are significantly undervalued, in my opinion. Going out, finding the diamonds in the rough, if you will. And, well, if you guys want to come do that with us, check out that link down below in the description of this video. Over the last 6 months alone, Nebius at $17, Novartis at $2, Applied Digital at $3.50 or so. We bought Tesla again in the 200s, around the 220 area. What was the other one we got recently? Hims at like $22, between 17 and 22, right? These are all companies just in the last 6 months that a lot of which were underappreciated. Like Nebius had zero analyst coverage when we bought it. Zero. Not a single analyst was covering the stock at $17. Now it's almost in the 50s. And people love it. People know of it. Same with Applied Digital, right? Bought that in the 3s, went into the 15s. So let's start with futures and what's going on in the broader market. You could see right now S&P futures are down 0.81%, almost 1%. NASDAQ futures are down about 1%, and Dow futures are down 0.81%. Oil is up 2.17%. So a little bit of a reaction here in energy markets. That suggests to me this is about the Israel-Iran conflict. The main headline here on CNBC is, quote, "A terrible spiral of escalation. World braces for intensifying Iran-Israel conflict." It says all eyes are on the White House as U.S. President Donald Trump weighs carrying out military strikes on Iran. Leaders from the UK, Russia, China, Germany, and beyond have weighed in on the growing conflict, which is showing no signs of de-escalating. Chances of diplomacy are looking increasingly bleak as Iran and Israel continue to trade increasingly deadly blows. The Kremlin warned Thursday that U.S. intervention in Iran would set off a, quote, terrible spiral of escalation, while Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova told Reuters that the world is, quote, millimeters away from a nuclear catastrophe. The president on Wednesday said, quote, "I may do it, I may not. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble and they want to negotiate," he told Reuters on the White House lawn on Wednesday. He added, quote, "The next week is going to be big." The president said later from the Oval Office that he likes to make the final decision 1 second before it's due because things change, especially with war. Now, let's be honest, when it comes to geopolitical conflicts, they don't tend to be long-lasting negative catalysts for markets because Wall Street doesn't care who is killing who is bombing who. Wall Street only cares about financial and economic impacts. Now, with the Middle East situation, there is a clear impact potentially on energy. And I am optimistic that this will eventually end in diplomacy, in Iran coming to the White House. And let me tell you, when it is announced, if it is announced that Iran is coming to the White House, Wall Street is going to assume this conflict is over with, and stocks will rally aggressively. Now, despite that, though, we have another issue, and that is an incompetent Fed. The Fed is compromised. Let's be honest. Good news is it is already June, it's almost July, and we get a new Fed chair in the first 3 months of 2026. So we don't have to wait too long for the Fed to get uncompromised. Here's the deal. I was a Powell supporter for a long time, but yesterday changed that, okay? The Fed is compromised or incompetent or both because Powell said they're expecting a meaningful amount of inflation this year. But that's like hanging your whole strategy on expectations, okay? Which we haven't seen inflation at all in the first 2 months of tariffs being enforced. In fact, tariffs may actually be a deflationary force, okay? There is no evidence that we are going to see inflation at all via tariffs. Now, that's one reason why I think yesterday, markets actually showed how strong they are, because despite the incompetent Fed, which I think a lot of people are starting to think the Fed's kind of incompetent at this point, stocks still did okay. You were still pretty much break even on the day, which I think, again, is a sign of real strength. Now, last night and today, Donald Trump had more criticisms for the Fed. Late last night, he called Powell a real dummy, quote unquote, saying that we should be 2.5 points lower and that would save billions on all of Biden's short-term debt. Now, Trump says that he would do a much better job than these people if he ran the Fed, kind of hinting towards he would like to just be the Fed at this point. And Trump has said that he intends to announce his next pick for chair of the Federal Reserve, quote, very soon. Tomorrow in economic data, we have the Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index, business conditions, CapEx index, employment, new orders, and prices paid. But that's a regional data set. It's probably not going to move the markets. Some more headlines here. White House Press Secretary Leavitt says Trump thinks there is a substantial chance of Iran negotiations. White House Press Secretary Leavitt says U.S. Envoy Witkoff has been in touch with Iran and correspondence has continued. That Trump believes diplomacy is still an option with Iran. And she says Trump will make the decision on whether to attack Iran within 2 weeks. Most of Wall Street was expecting by this weekend. So he says within 2 weeks. That could mean this weekend or that could mean 2 weeks from now. But we'll see. That might actually be a positive catalyst for markets coming tomorrow. So again, the point I'm making here, despite the Fed being incompetent, despite this conflict in the Middle East, which hopefully comes to an end pretty soon, the markets have still done pretty well. And that's a sign of market strength. Now, in broader news today, the war will continue for 2 to 3 weeks, and if America joins, it could take days. Sources to the Broadcasting Authority cited by Al Arabiya News. The U.S. and British foreign ministers will discuss finding a way out and presenting a final offer to Iran in Washington on Thursday, CBS News citing an official. And quote, the impending collapse of the Iranian regime is far from the truth, according to NBC quoting an Israeli intelligence official. And Israeli TV broadcast images of the arrival of U.S. military aid. We expect a U.S. decision on joining the war within 24 to 48 hours, according to an official cited by the Times of Israel. So at some point over this weekend. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu says change or fall of Iranian regime is not a goal, but could be a result. Which again, I think this is part of Trump's strategy. Like threatening US involvement is such a bad thing for Iran. It's such a lose-lose proposition for Iran that just threatening this potentially brings them to the negotiations table and gets a real deal done. It seems like ever since Trump threatened the strikes in Iran, Iran has really opened up or cozied up to the idea of signing a nuclear deal, even saying that they don't ever want to have a nuclear weapon. And apparently Trump was briefed on both the risks and the benefits of bombing Fordow, Iran's most heavily secured nuclear facility, and his mindset is that disabling it is necessary because of the risk of weapons being produced in a relatively short period of time. That is where we believe, Western officials believe, that the highest grade enriched uranium is held, and that without destroying that facility, Iran could still develop a nuclear weapon. U.S. envoy Witkoff and Iran's counterpart spoke several times in the past week. 3 diplomats are cited. New York Times, citing U.S. military officials, reported that the U.S. Navy is considering distributing its ships in the Gulf to reduce their vulnerability. Iran's foreign minister said Tehran would not return to negotiations unless Israel stopped the attacks. U.S. and Iran are holding secret talks amid ongoing Israeli strikes. Envoy Witkoff and Foreign Minister Araghchi held direct calls as Iran signals nuclear flexibility if attacks stop. Tehran rejects talks under fire with EU ministers to meet Ashki Friday in Geneva. And Trump has signed an executive order extending the deadline for the TikTok closing for 90 days. Iran's Supreme National Security Council says Iran will use a different strategy if a third party joins Israel in the war. And according to a White House official, Trump will receive an intelligence briefing today in the Situation Room. And Netanyahu says the U.S. is providing significant assistance in our conflict with Iran. Iranian media says this night will not be like the previous ones. On Truth Social, Trump says the Wall Street Journal has no idea what my thoughts are concerning Iran. And in the news today, China is to cooperate with the U.S. in drug control and illegal immigrants. Like 90% of the world's fentanyl comes from a small region in China. So getting fentanyl under control paves the way for substantially lower tariffs on China, like only a 10% tariff on China if the fentanyl tariff is removed. And maybe, Trump could even lower the tariff even more if there was serious progress made on fentanyl. At least that's what I would do. If you're serious and really stop the fentanyl problem, I would probably take it all the way down to 10%, reduce the old tariffs put on China as well. I'm surprised that futures are not reacting more positively to this. In fact, futures have only gotten worse in the time of recording this video. S&P futures are now down 0.93%, NASDAQ futures down 1.1%, and Dow futures down 0.93% as well. Oil is up 2.63%. So people are definitely nervous about the whole Iran conflict prospect. And I think a lot of it has to do with tomorrow is Friday. And if we're going to get an attack on Iran, and it's going to happen this weekend, a lot of people are not going to want to hold their positions over the weekend. Okay, so if Friday's tomorrow's a red day, I'm not super shocked by that because, again, whenever you have a big catalyst, potentially over a weekend, a lot of people don't want to hold their positions and not be able to, change things over the weekend. Okay. And then wake up to a really big red market on Monday. A lot of Wall Street, their risk management profiles don't allow them to hold over a weekend when there is incredible amounts of volatility. And European officials increasingly resigned to 10% baseline tariff rates on reciprocal tariffs in any US-EU trade deal. And probably one of the headlines that continues to weaken markets here this morning, Iran's Parliamentary National Security Committee board member says Iran has many options to respond to aggression, including closing the Strait of Hormuz. So, again, that makes sense why energy is responding so negatively. But that's like that's the end of Iran as you know it. Okay, that would immediately get the U.S. involved, probably a boots on the ground kind of situation. At the very least, some intense bombing would take place. Now, Alva, an AI co-pilot here, says if Iran actually shut down the Strait of Hormuz, it would trigger immediate energy shocks. Oil could rip to $130 plus a barrel, dragging global inflation and risk assets with it. Markets are already uneasy. Bitcoin dumping on airstrike headlines, then clawback losses as traders hedge for chaos. So, again, that's the issue with this conflict. So hopefully we do get some kind of meeting set up between the US and Iran, and Wall Street can start to lower the odds of an energy shock, because that's what it's about at this point. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on all of this down below in the comment section. If there is some kind of big news shared, I will be sharing that with you later on tonight, because we know how Trump operates. We know Trump likes to move markets, and we could get a positive headline tonight about trade negotiations, but we will have to see. Let me know your thoughts again on all of this down below in the comment section. If you guys want to come trade with us live in real time, check out that link down below in the description of this video. Plan to do quite a bit of trading tomorrow because of the volatility that we could see over this weekend, for good, for better, or for worse. But what we're really focused on over there is finding those smaller cap companies that are those hidden gems, those stocks that are overlooked, underappreciated, that are doing big things that Wall Street doesn't know about yet. I call it information disparity, where like maybe there's news that comes out or a company's doing something, but Wall Street generally doesn't know about it. They're not super well-known companies, and eventually Wall Street's going to catch on to those stocks. I want to be there before Wall Street catches on. That's where the money is made, okay? Nebius, Applied Digital, Novartis Semiconductors, even HIMS at like $22, right? These are some of the buys we've had in the last like 6 months or so, that I think there's a lot of opportunity in these names, and I'm sharing my positions. I'm showing you guys the trades that I'm making, and I'm going pretty large in some of these, because when I see an opportunity, I like to seize it. Okay, I don't like to play things small. When I do the due diligence, when I put in the work and realize the opportunity. Okay, 9 times out of 10, I'm mad at myself because I played something way too small or sold out too early of something I knew was going to be a winner or a quote-unquote hidden gem, underappreciated stock. So check that out if you guys have not done so already. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. So let me know your thoughts around all of this information down below in the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.